Hey everybody, how's it going? Christian from Treasure Town here, and today I'm going to have a conversation with Chris Tisdale from CoinTable. We're going to be discussing how he came up as a successful coin dealer, going from somebody who knew nothing about coins, and now he's a big player in the coin space. So yeah, so happy to have you on today, Chris.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here. I've been super excited. I've been looking forward to it, and yeah, happy to be here, Christian.
For sure. I had originally heard about you from some of my friends. They're like, you got to talk to this guy. And I saw some of your videos. I was like, we gotta make this happen. So, yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit before this, but I was pretty kind of enamored or impressed with what you've done over time. And I was kind of curious if you could just pretty much take us back to the start and, people can understand how somebody made it in the coins game. I'm sure anybody, whether they're a new collector who's not even thinking about dealing or somebody who's interested or already doing it, they can learn something from the chat.
Yeah, that's kind of my goal, and I will do that. The reason I love coins so much is because of the abundance factor. I really, honestly, truly believe that there's a niche for everybody. I think anybody and everybody can find a lane or a specific niche and be successful. So basically, just to kind of set the scene, it was 2009. And my first child was born, and basically I kind of had a handful of things come together at once. I walked away from a really good paying sales job, and I started a company, and it was a really solid business idea that could be its own subject in and of itself. It's still one of the better business plans that I've ever seen because of how scalable it was. It had nothing to do with coins. And what happened there is I ended up getting involved with the wrong business partner. And so in 2011 is basically kind of where all this came together. I was walking away from the company that I had just built, and I didn't know that coins really were even a thing.
Okay.
Think about this. It was 2010. It was somewhere between 2010, 2011, where I learned that. So how it all happened essentially is I was having a falling out with my business partner, and I just knew that I needed something else where I wasn't going to be relying on others, so to speak. And so it was this was during the time when silver was shooting way up high in price. It was at 40, it hit 49 an ounce, I believe, and was on its way back down. It was at like 42. And I remember reading this article about how our coinage was silver, 1964 and earlier. And looking back on that, it's crazy that I didn't even know that. I didn't even know this industry existed. And so what I did is I remember I went upstairs, I dumped out a little, my change bucket, change jar, basically. It was an old fish tank, 1 gallon sized glass. And I dumped it out. It made a pile on the floor like this big. So I would not recommend doing, or I would recommend you don't do that. It took me all night to go through it, but I found a silver quarter and a silver dime. And honestly, man, that was the beginning of the end, really. As far as just me, I went down that rabbit hole fast and hard. At the time, silver was so high that quarter was worth $8 that each silver quarter was worth $8. And so I immediately was like, oh, I'm going to order $50 from the bank and yada, yada. So I ordered a box, $500 box of $50 from my credit union. It had 25 silvers in it. And that was it, man. I was so hooked. It was unbelievable. I don't necessarily think that I was looking at it from a business perspective yet, but I had the like, oh wow, this, you could probably make money doing this. But like it was probably sometime from there, took maybe 6 months to a year before I realized like, yep, this is what I'm going to do as far as coins go. So I started coin roll hunting. I just told you about the first box I found, 25 silvers in it. I was doing 5 to 10 boxes of $50 a week, every week religiously. And it took me over a year before I found another box with that many silvers in it. So that definitely was not normal. On average, I averaged it all out, and it was like almost 1.2 a box or something like that. So definitely not the easiest way to make money, but it was a super fun hobby, and it had me looking at coins all day, all the time. And I guess in the process, I was developing my eye. So that's kind of how it all started. And then one day I was driving past and recognized a coin shop and was like, oh, that's a coin shop. And so I went in there, I bought a book. The exact book actually was United States it was like the Red Book of Half Dollars. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's written by Rick Tamaska, and it's the Red Book for Kennedys and Franklins, I believe. So yeah, I don't know if you guys. Anyways, so about the book, read it, and that was that. I think back, and there was a handful of of events that took place where I remember one time I bought some proof sets. Another coin shop I went into, he had a bunch of proofs, and he was selling them for junk silver, and I bought them, and I was like, these look amazing. And so that's kind of one of the things that took me in the direction of proofs. And so I ended up buying a bunch of proof sets from this guy for silver melt value. And I pulled out the ones I thought were Cameo at the time, threw the rest up on my local classifieds, and I made like $300 in 5 minutes. And so that was definitely one of those light bulb moments where I was like, yep, I think I could maybe do this as a business. And just a couple little things like that happened. And so when I decided that I was going to do that, I didn't have hardly any money, and I didn't really know anything about the coin business. And I just decided I was going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And it was kind of crazy.
What years were these proof sets from? Because I know there's the super valuable ones once you get into the early 50s, or, there's a lot of modern stuff. What years were you targeting here?
I wasn't even targeting anything yet other than silver. I was targeting silver. And so these would have been 1960 to 1964.
Okay. And when you sold those, was that just kind of, you said you sold a few of the classifieds, but what were you doing with the better coins?
I don't know. Honestly, I didn't know. I hadn't really developed my eye. I just knew that, from reading, again, Rick Tamaska's book, a lot of my help comes from Rick Tamaska. He is a phenomenal resource, and he's done amazing things for the coin business. So he specializes in half dollars. Anyways, I read his book, and I just knew to look for Cameo. And so I looked for what I thought was Cameo at the time and took those out, set them aside. I thought they were special, or I thought they might have a premium. I didn't know what it would be at the time. And then I just sold the other ones.
And for those who might not know, the Cameo, and then there's also deep Cameo, but it's that strong proof contrast pretty much. I guess I'm kind of having difficulty verbalizing. How would you describe it to somebody who hasn't seen a Cameo?
I wish I had one in front of me. How I would describe it is, these proof coins, they were made, they weren't monochromatic. In other words, they weren't just one color, like circulation strikes. They were the ones that were early. The early ones minted off the die were they had contrast. That's what I'm trying to say. They had contrast. The devices were super frosty, and the mirrors were deep and black. And so it was kind of like black on white. And that, if you get a proof that's black and white, that would be probably safe to say that's a deep Cameo. And then every coin they minted after that, it kind of loses a little bit of that frost to the point where they're just all shiny. They're all the same color. And so deep Cameo is kind of where you look at a proof and you see the black and white. Cameo's where it's more than just contrast. It's frost against solid, deep mirrors, but it's not your black and white. We'll have to do a segment. That's its own segment. We'll do that because I have plenty of examples to where we can kind of compare and go through.
For sure. And so at this point, I'm kind of on the time. Is it like 2011, 2012? And kind of how are you taking off from that point after you sold the sets you picked up from the dealer?
Good question. This would put us into 2012 now. 2012 is when I listed the very first coin I had on eBay. And that was another one of those like moments. I basically went to the coin show. There was a local coin show. And so I went to the coin show and I bought an accented hair Kennedy. I bought a 1964 proof set. And then when I brought it home and I was looking close and, going to the book and looking at my proof set, I was like, oh, wait, there's an accented hair for the 1964 Kennedy. And so I started looking at my 64 stuff and I'm like, that is one. And so anyways, I cut this coin out and I put it on eBay, and I don't even know what happened or why, I should say. I don't know why it happened, but it got bid up to like $300.
That's big.
That day or the next day. So I'm over here like just freaking out. It was a 7-day auction, and that coin ended up selling for like $350. But I mean, I paid, if I remember right, I want to say I I want to say I just bought it in a 1964 proof set and then saw later that it was an accented hair. Back then, it was so easy to find accent hairs and just pay the normal 1964 price. So to answer your question, this was back in 2012. 2012 is when I first started selling on eBay. And so, yeah, solid. By 2012 is when I knew for sure that I was going to make six figures as a coin dealer. I didn't know how, I just knew I was going to do it. And it's very weird to say it even now, because I can remember telling my wife, like, look, I'm going to buy and sell coins. And I know I can make six figures a year doing that. And literally as the words would, and I believed it, but as the words came out of my mouth, my brain would be like, yeah, but really, are you? Like,
yeah,
really, are you? Because that sounds a little bit. And so then I would sit there and I'd be like, am I crazy? Am I delusional? Like in my mind, I'd literally in my mind be like, okay, is this realistic? Or have I just created this basically, if I created this big, huge illusion to distract myself from this crappy reality I was in? Because it was tough, man. It really was tough. I didn't have an income. And so when bills were due, I had to basically figure it out and sell coins. And so I just jumped in head first. I would not recommend anybody doing it that way. It was pretty, it was turbulent is the word I would use. But here I am, and I'm glad I did it, and I wouldn't change a thing. So
where were you, sir? I know you mentioned kind of the coin shows, but where were you in some coin shops? Where were you sourcing the coins? And I guess at the beginning, was it mostly you buying coins, then selling them on eBay or with other dealers? Or could you walk us through that?
So in the beginning, yes, I started going to all the coin shops around here, and I was buying proof sets, and it just kind of escalated and went up from there. Going back to that book about half dollars that I had read, I even remember the very first coin where I spent like real money. Well, in my mind, it was real money at the time. I wasn't just buying junk silver at that point. And what happened there was, so to answer your question, I was buying it from the coin dealers at the shops, but then there's a show here maybe once every 3-4 months. And so I was at a coin show, and I was just walking, and I'll never forget it. Stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a 1967 SMS Kennedy. It was graded MS 67 Ultra Cameo. And I asked the guy, I'm like, how much for this? And he says, $250. I'm like, what? $250? Like, and in my brain, I could remember from reading that book that, in that book, he says those are worth like, I don't remember. At the time, it was 700 or, 650 to 750 or something like that. And so I didn't have the confidence to buy it right then, but I left the coin show, came home, checked my book. I'm like, yeah, that's the one. Holy crap, he only wants $250. So I remember I raced back the next morning. The entire time I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way that coin's going to be there. Somebody else is going to have seen that coin and bought it. Well, it was there. I bought it for $250, and I sold it on eBay for, it was either just under 700 or just over 700. And so that was one of those light bulb moments that kind of helped me along on the journey. And that's where I was sourcing my coins basically at this point, was from coin shops and local coin shows.
Definitely. And then so one thing that I was kind of thinking of is, it sounds like you benefited a lot by learning a lot of information. On the other hand, you kind of jumped in feet first with your business. So, obviously clearly important to get a lot of knowledge. And I guess that just kind of speaks to something that I say a lot on my channel about how important it is to just get educated and like know the book values. And while those can be a little bit out of touch with reality, like just how important that is. And so kind of going from there, clearly you're specializing in half dollars and a little bit of, silver stuff in general. Did you branch out after that, or was it kind of continuing to be in this lane of like being an expert in the halves?
It's kind of funny because number one, to address the first part of what you said is, one thing you talk about a lot is to get educated. One thing I talk a lot about is to develop your eye. And I cannot overstate the importance of developing your eye. It doesn't matter if you specialize in like old coppers or, Lincoln cents, even Lincoln cents or wheat cents, dimes, nickels, quarters, silver dollars, gold coins. It really doesn't matter. If you're looking at coins, I cannot overstate the importance of developing your eyeball. Well, when I was coin roll hunting, I mean, I was looking at half dollars a lot, like for hours a week, a day, every day, all day.
Yeah.
And then I'd look at them that way. And then I'd also get online and I was at this point, I was studying photographs from heritage auctions. I was studying pictures of coins and I basically taught myself how to grade. To be fair, there's a coin dealer here who's my same age. And I was in his shop one day. He had a shop at the time. And I asked him, like, well, how did you learn to grade these Morgans? And he's like, I taught myself. And it was such at the time, if he wouldn't have said that, I don't know when I would have figured out that you can literally just go teach yourself how to grade coins by looking at pictures, because that's what I did. That's how I taught myself how to grade. I remember I would look at photographs until my eyes felt like they were going to bleed. So it was nonstop just studying and looking at coins to develop the eye. And so I can't overstate that enough. I kind of got on a little tangent there. Bring me back.
Yeah,
Bring
no,
me back in.
no. I mean, that's the cool thing about talking with somebody like you is you've got this perspective. Even if I don't know what I'm gonna, what your response is gonna be, it's gonna come from a real educated and experienced. I think more than educated. Like, it's important to have the actual experience of dealing with the coins. That's what's so often awesome. But I was kind of curious what the path, like, did you continue to stay mostly in that lane of the half dollars that you were mentioning, or were you branching out or kind of doing a little bit of both?
It was funny, man. I remember I got to the point. So now we're talking like 2013, 14, even into 2015, where I had heard coin dealer, I've made friends with coin dealers by this point, and I had heard guys say, find a specialty, find something and become the expert in that thing. And it's really bizarre how it happened. I mean, it was a very natural progression into half dollars, Franklin's and Kennedy's, because as you know, when you're searching half dollars for silver, if you find a silver one, it's going to be a Kennedy 90% of the time, maybe 10% of the time, Franklin. I mean, out of all the halves I searched, I found 2 Walking Liberties total. And so that's kind of where the progression happened for me. It kind of naturally put me in that lane. And I got to the point where I would go into a coin shop or at a show and I would buy proof sets and uncirculated rolls of Kennedys and Franklins. And I would literally sit there and tell myself, like, dude, why are you buying this? You got to branch out. You got to get into this other stuff. And I wish I would have been, well, I don't really have any regrets, but one thing that I could have done to help ease my mind a little bit is go back and tell myself, like, embrace it. I could have embraced it a little earlier. It was probably 2016 before I really fully embraced the fact that, yeah, I'm the Franklin and Kennedy guy, period. Proofs, business strikes, varieties. I have made some incredible finds with double dies and, double die obverse, reverse, RPMs and stuff like that. So yeah, I just became the Franklin and Kennedy guy. I didn't really branch out. I branched out in the sense that I could go to a show and cherry pick certain, Morgan dollars that in my opinion were undergraded or, dealing in other coins. But my specialty has pretty much been Franklin's and Kennedy's since the get. And the branching out really that I did was basically I stopped. So it used to be that I would take all the Kennedys or all the half dollars and I would just put the fractionals in tubes. And then it got to the point where I was grading a lot of those fractionals also. And so I've done very well with that whole niche of 1950 to 1970 proof sets in general. By far, I've graded more halves than anything else, but I've also graded a lot of fractionals too.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that's
so
the extent of it.
I'm so interested in that because after this, I want to talk a little bit about the varieties thing. We talk about that on my channel sometimes, but just the idea of like how you can do so well in such a small market. And I feel like people might not be aware, but kind of, I guess, how the game is played in terms of like people going for the top pop or like how the grades, I was looking at the PCGS CoinFax prices, how the difference between like a 68 and a 69 or 67 and a 68 on some of the coins can just be monstrous. And I guess to add on to that, I'm kind of curious, who's buying the coins that are at the top of the curve, so to speak.
Those crazy numbers.
Yeah,
man, it blows my mind. There's been a handful of times where I've legitimately just been completely lost for words. So So to start off at the beginning there, as I embraced being the $half guy,
Mhm.
better and more, I started learning. I mean, I would say just off the top of my head for 1964 Kennedys, I want to say there's 30 varieties that I could literally be aware of and find right now. And if it's a good enough coin, depending on where it would grade, potentially make a ton of money on that. So it started with me, as far as the varieties go, it started with the accent hair Kennedy.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, this is kind of a side note, but it was a very important part of my process. The very first batch of coins that I sent to NGC, or any grading company actually, uh, it was a bulk batch of accent hair Kennedys. They were all accent hairs. And I didn't pay a premium I don't know that I paid a premium for any of those. Back then, I was buying 1964 proof sets for anywhere from, I want to say, $17 to $22 a proof set, maybe 24. I think they were like 25 for a while there. And it was just very easy to find accent hairs. Most dealers were overlooking them. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I was by then. I started looking for areas that were being overlooked.
Yeah.
I was specifically looking for stuff that dealers just either didn't care about, didn't have time to worry about, or just, specifically like they were overlooking them. And so I told you guys I started with no money, and I had very little money. Most of the time I didn't have any money other than the coins that I had. And I would have to sell them to buy more, and
Mhm.
played that whole game for several years. But the very first batch of coins that I submitted to NGC was a batch of accent hair Kennedys, and it came back. I sold the entire batch to one buyer, and it was like, that first deal there, that's kind of how I would actually say that's how I bankrolled myself into the business, by finding accent hair Kennedys. And so far we've got that. I'm coin roll hunting for silver, which has got me looking at Kennedys and the occasional Franklin. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of what put me in that lane. And then the proofs kind of came into play shortly, while I was coin roll hunting, because one of the coin shops was selling proof coinage for silver weight.
Mhm.
And so then I learned about the proofs, and then the accent hair, kind of discovering that I had one of those is kind of what helped me realize the varieties in just that game. Because at the time, if you found an accented hair, it was easily 10x
Mhm.
what a normal Kennedy was selling for in that grade. Five to 10x,
Yeah. Yeah.
for the accent hair versus the normal one. And again, I was just finding them in regularly priced 64 proof sets.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what led me into those three. Well, excuse me, those three events kind of led me into the lane of where I'm at. So
Definitely. And then I guess, we touched on it a little bit with the, well, we touched on it a lot with the accented hair. But then there's also like the smaller stuff like the DDOs or the RPMs. Have there been any standout, like cooler stories where you've made a coin, that means getting the coin, attributing it and getting it graded, like anything stand out there maybe?
yeah, man, there's a handful that stand out, and so I'll share a couple with you. Not the first one was a dime. It was a 1964D dime.
Mhm.
Um, when I started in this business, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any coin dealer. I could not, now I would recommend, if somebody walks into a coin shop, to say, hey, I'm so-and-so. Mike from this other shop recommended that I swing by here. Like, just doing something like that can
Mhm.
create, I guess the point I'm trying to make is I was walking into these coin shops completely cold, like, hey, my name's Chris. I want to learn the business. I'm brand new. I was so naive.
Yeah.
Most of them tried taking advantage of me, but there was a couple, one in particular, where the guy instantly started helping me out. He
Mhm.
would answer the silliest questions, and he's one of the very few from right out of the gate who would literally, I'd walk in and he'd pull out his green empty monster box it was full of junk silver, and he'd just pop it on the counter, and I would sit there for hours looking through his junk silver bin.
Mhm.
And I was looking for uncirculated stuff. I was looking for, by then I had kind of learned about the varieties. And so I found this 64D dime. I paid melt for it, which was like, it couldn't have been much more than $2 at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Silver was still higher, I want to say, but I paid $2, $2.13, maybe something crazy like that. And I didn't even know exactly what it was. I looked at it with my loop and I could tell that it had doubled letters on the reverse. And so I did eventually end up getting that coin attributed with, or I sent it in to get graded with NGC. They attributed it and it graded MS66. And this was one of my first very valuable lessons. That was a top pop and it was a 1 of 1 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this coin I paid $2 for, I sold that coin on eBay, and it took a while. It takes that right buyer to see that. But I got like, I know I had it listed for like between 900 and 1,000, and I got $700 or $800 for that dime. So that's one standout story, and that's because it was the first one where I realized like the potential. Like, holy cow, seriously. I mean, it was just phenomenal. There's a million in between, but I'll go from that one to one of the more extreme examples.
Mm-hmm.
Was the 1964D Kennedy has 4 RPMs. Well, when I say 4, it's PCGS attributes 4 RPMs for the 64D Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I don't even remember why I looked or how I noticed, but I just happened to notice that the FS504 only had 1 attributed, and it was an AU55 or an AU58. So they didn't even have, there was 0 known in state. And so make a little mental note of that, just go about my thing. Well, sometime later, I don't know if it was a month or a year, but I bought an uncirculated roll of Kennedy half dollars. I paid $160 or $165 for the roll. And I bought the roll specifically because I could see with my naked eye that a whole bunch of them were D over D. I mean, the FS501 is so noticeable that I could see it, that that's what they were.
Yeah.
Well, I got them back to my house and started looking. 10 of them were FS501, and the other 10 were this RPM FS504. So literally the entire roll. Yeah, like it was awesome. In my own mind, I was super excited. I remember it was July 4th, actually, when that happened, because I went straight from the coin shop mm-hmm. to like a parade and saw fireworks and stuff with my wife, and she was waiting for me. And I'm like, won't even believe what I just found. And she's just like, stop talking about coins. Yeah. She's been so supportive. It's amazing, but she's not a big fan of coins. I've ruined coins for her. But anyways, I noticed that these 10 of the FS504, PCGS still had only attributed 1. And it wasn't even mint state. So I sold 1 raw for $500 to a guy who's a registry player. And we became good friends. Mm-hmm. And, which I thought was crazy, honestly. Paid $165 for the whole roll, and I just sold 1 for $500. It was crazy. And then I started grading them, and I'll make a long story short. The first 4 that I sold with Great Collections, and they sold for over $10,000 for those 4, just the first 4.
Unbelievable. Wow. I mean, that's because it is pretty crazy though when you have 10 of the 11 known. But that's a huge market, and that's wild to think, because some of the prices kind of blow my mind, because you have some errors like the 504 sounds like, I'm not familiar with the coin, but it sounds like it's not super pronounced. And then whereas like I get paying the big money for the really pronounced stuff, but then the smaller stuff, like there's a lot of things that aren't attributed officially by the grading companies. So it's just kind of crazy to see how that can develop.
2 points to that. Number one, it is so hard to see that if you don't know exactly what, so the first point is I think it's kind of silly that they even attribute it. It's so, you have to have a loop and you have to know exactly where to look and what you're looking for to even see it. Mm-hmm. It's beyond me how it even became an actual FS504 RPM, something that any grading company would attribute. I still haven't figured out really what determines. I know who determines it, but I don't know what they use to decide, we're going to go ahead and give this one the number, that one, nah. Mm-hmm. It's kind of crazy. And then the second thing is the people paying big money for those coins are the registry set collectors, where mm-hmm. if that coin is a coin that, I mean, from my experience, what I've learned is those registry players, they don't care. A lot of them have enough money to where they don't care. They just mm-hmm. need that coin to be in the top spot as a registry player. And it only takes 2 of those types of people to start fighting over it. And that's when you see those crazy numbers.
Yes,
So
definitely. That's what I say on some of my video. I'll do some cherry picker stuff, and a lot of the values are way slow. Yeah, they're way lower once they don't have the attribution. But like this stuff that is so rare. Like in that case, there's just one certified before you got them. Like you just have the people at the top buying it. Like I, kind of a tangent, and I don't even know if this is true, but I always say probably don't throw something like that just up for bid on eBay. Like you want to place it to the right buyer because that's kind of the nature of the market.
yeah, I think it goes both ways. On a coin like that, I definitely like that dime, for example. I think if I'd have put that up on eBay, going back now to the 64D, that was the DDR,
Yeah.
top pop, one of one. If I would have, to what, going back to what you said, I think if I'd have put that on a 7-day auction, it would have done very, very, very poorly.
Mhm.
That's one of those coins where I knew that I was going to list it for an exorbitant price and just wait for the one buyer who was looking for that coin. And it did take several months. I remember it. It took several months for
Mhm.
that dime to sell. Now, on the other hand, the 64D, I realized pretty quickly, Kennedy's, you guys can go on PCGS or NGC's website and take a look at the registry sets and see they're pretty competitive. It's actually been kind of, or at least it was kind of surprising
Mhm.
how popular they are. And so on those ones, okay, first of all, confession to make, I didn't grade all 10 of those at once.
Uh-huh.
I was advised by somebody who knew more than myself at the time, like, hey, don't grade all of those at once. Grade one or two at a time, and then sell them.
Mhm.
On those, I did auction style, starting at 99 cents, no reserve,
Wow.
and I just let the market do its thing. And ever since then, really, I pretty much am a believer in selling auction style, like true auction style, starting at 99 cents with no reserve.
Interesting.
For every one coin, my belief is for every one coin that kind of falls through the cracks and you get way less because of it,
Mhm.
10 sell for more than what you thought you would get because of people like me. I
Yeah.
get bidding on a coin and I don't care that I can buy it in 20 other places on eBay for less than what it's bid at. I'm not going to let you outbid me.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's goofy, but that's what happens because of guys like me and ego and pride.
Mhm.
And I feel like for a lot of these bidders, it becomes as much about not losing the auction as much as it is about owning the item.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's kind of fascinating, but that's how I sell everything now is auction style. With the auction on my eBay store, everything is just buy it now or best offer.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of gonna. That was gonna be my next question, pretty much. And I think we've talked about doing a little more content after this, so maybe we'd save the bulk of this chat for a later time. But I'm assuming when you say you're auctioning coins, it's not just on eBay. You're going other places, or maybe it is only eBay.
No, I'm going other places. So first of all, it was probably 4 or 5 years where I was buying and selling coins. And you guys, what I basically did is I got in and I studied the Kennedy market and became so, I would say looking back that I became a practitioner on Kennedys. And it was basically only 1964 Kennedys too. That's what's crazy. And so at the time there was Heritage Auctions, Teletrade, great collections. Yeah, I think that's it. And then eBay, obviously. And I would literally watch Teletrade or Great Collections, Heritage, whatever, and I would buy coins there and get them, put them on eBay for 2, 3x, 4x sometimes. And then there was other times I'd buy somebody would put a coin as a buy it now on eBay. I would buy it, get it, relist it for 2 or 3x and flip coins that way. So in the first 4 or 5 years, I was basically buying and selling on eBay. And when I say buying, I was buying from a few auction houses and then selling everything on eBay. I was grading a little bit, but mainly just buying and selling graded coins, and then also auctioning raw coins. And so, to get back to your question, the point I wanted to make there is even something as common as a 1964 Kennedy. I studied that market to the point where I was making pretty decent money just buying and selling those.
Mhm.
So I think that can happen anywhere in numismatics. I think you can pick a date, you can pick a fractional, you can pick a president. You can almost pick anything and just be like, that's the reason why I like this coin.
Mhm.
And if you become the guy that knows more than anyone else about that one coin, you can find opportunities. I'm just telling you, I guarantee it, period. So, and I love that about numismatics. Getting back to your initial question, I eventually reached out to one of the largest auctioning firms. I'm not even going to throw out names because I don't want to muddy. We don't even need to throw out names, but I tried very diligently to work with one of the larger auctioning firms, and they were all about it. I'd be like, yeah, I have some coins. I think they're worth 50 or 75 grand or whatever it was. I mean, it wasn't a ton of money, but to me, it was a ton of money.
Yeah.
And it was enough to where it got their attention. And then the second they heard Kennedy's and Franklin's, just completely lost interest. I tried 3 times hard. I tried hard 3 times to work with a certain auction firm, and it just never worked out. So that led me to reaching out to Ian at Great Collections. Best thing I ever could have done for myself. And I don't care for anyone out there that wants to sell coins via auctions. Ian at Great Collections is going to treat you the same whether you have a $10 coin to consign or a $10 million deal to consign. And that can't go. That is the most valuable. That just goes a long way for me. Because that's not how the coin business works, I've learned.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And I know, like, even before we talked, like I was vaguely aware of it, but it's just crazy how, to your point, people don't know about all these different niches within, like, it sounds like there's just enormous potential in Kennedy's, and I'm sure there's enormous potential in a bunch of other stuff. And then kind of in a different thing, it's just like so neat that that's pretty much what you're able to do, just buying and selling. People can do that, selling on eBay, selling online, because I think a lot of, like, a misconception people have is that you have to have, like, brick and mortar to be a successful coin dealer. And I know, working in the coin shop, that's definitely not the case with a lot of the people we're working with. They're just kind of dealers who are traveling around. And I actually haven't confirmed with you, but that's what I assume you've been doing pretty much the whole time.
Yeah. So for the first few years, my goal was to own a coin shop. Then I learned enough about coins to where I was like, that's not my goal no more. In fact, it's not for me. I couldn't do it even if I wanted to, for many reasons. Nothing negative, but just, I've got a family. I can't be married. When you have a coin shop, you got to be married to it. I feel, and I can't do that right now. I don't want to do that. I have a young family, and I also am extremely passionate about hunting. And so, I like to work hard from January to August so that I can play hard from August to December. And so a coin shop wouldn't work for me. I've never had one. And I feel, God bless anyone who does have a coin shop, because there's other concerns also. The security concern is a huge, for me, is a huge concern. Coin business is relatively crazy, but no, you do not need a shop. I've never had a shop, and I sometimes feel like I do better than a lot of guys with a shop just because of the freedom not having a shop gives me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That sounded pretty, we hadn't discussed that, and that, like, having that August to December or whatever it is, that sounds incredible. Like, I
haven't told you about that
yet. Yeah, no, that's insane, and in a good way.
It is one of my character defects. Let's just put it that way.
But that sounds great. And then do you deal at all now? Like, has there been any change, would you say, in the past, like, 3 or 4 years, or is it kind of more just continuing to be an expert from the 50s to the 70s on the halves with having the eye for other stuff? But
I could spend 14 hours talking. I just pulled that number out of my, I mean, literally I could go, I want to go so many places with that question. I really do. But obviously we can't, but it goes back to just the abundance factor. So my biggest message is that there is abundance everywhere. If you look for it, you will find it. I genuinely believe when I say it doesn't matter where you put your time and energy. If you just focus on that, you can find enormous opportunities there. And so just, you got to develop your eye, become the practitioner, and find the abundance that's out there. Do it with an open mind. Instead of I can't, you got to think I can. I'm totally off on a tangent again. I don't even know what you asked me. My God. I don't even know what you asked me. What'd you ask me? I'm sorry.
No, I think you gave a good answer, but because there's just like so much you're saying that you can talk about in terms of what you've been getting into recently. Um, in
Okay,
like based
perfect. I don't want to interrupt you, but so I feel like I've tried to just follow the market. You know, a lot of these guys. So in other words, what I mean by that is I wasn't out there blindly just doing something this or that or whatever. I see a lot of guys making that mistake where they go out there and they buy a coin because they think they can sell it for this much. What I've always tried to do is figure out exactly what I can sell it for first and then buy it for less.
yeah.
Sounds obvious, but you know, I see a lot of guys that don't do that. And so what I've kind of tried to do is I would get in with certain marketers and find out what they're making, what future campaigns do they have coming up, what would they sell, what could they sell if I made it for them, you know. And in the beginning, I got stuff. For example, I would go to a coin dealer and say, hey, look, what if I made a bunch of these? Would you sell them? Would you be able to sell them? And he'd say, and by make, I mean grade them, right?
Yeah.
He'd say, well, you know, Chris, we usually make those ourselves. Well, of course, because that gives them all the profit. And so what I would do is I'd say, okay, well, let's find that happy medium where if I made them for you, it would allow you to come up with a lot more to sell. And what's that number where if I sold them to you for this, it makes sense for you to buy them from me by the hundreds or thousands. And you're still making all the money that you need to make. And now you don't have to worry about the time and energy and effort that it takes to make the coins.
Definitely.
And so it took a minute, but I got a few of those market makers or marketers to kind of get to the point where they'd be like, so, hey, you know, I'm going to be doing a campaign in the future and I'm going to be selling business strike Kennedys. I really need 65, 66 and 67s in MS65 or above. Perfect. Awesome. Message received. So I would go out and I would literally buy thousands of uncirculated rolls of those coins. And I'd sit there and you know, a lot of them look like crap right out of the roll. So you got to clean them up a little bit, dip them or rinse them, acetone, you know, you got to conserve them. Let's just put it that way. And I would send those to grade, make 65, 66 better. And literally I was doing tens of thousands of those coins, you know. Dealers would laugh at me. I would literally buy uncirculated rolls of 40% Kennedys and they would laugh. And I would laugh too, because the fact that they were laughing at me was the real thing. That's what was funny, you know, because I would do a batch and make stupid money on one batch of coins. And so I always try to look at what the market's doing and then make my decisions from there. I've basically just kind of jumped around. I've stayed in my lane and I've stuck with my niche, but I've jumped around. So I went from, to give you an example, I went from making the 40% Kennedys to Franklin proofs. And really for the last couple of years, Franklin proofs have been so hot that I've almost primarily just made Franklin proofs by the thousands and tens of thousands. And I've really taken my foot off the gas at this point, and I'm not making them currently, but up until the beginning of this year, that's what I had been doing for the last couple of years, is almost exclusively focusing on Franklin proofs, because the market was so hot. It didn't matter how many I made. It was just gobbling them up as fast as I could make them. And I was happy and everybody was happy. So I try to follow the market is basically where I was going with that. So.
Great. Well, that sounds, you know, that pretty much brings us to the present. And, you know, I know that there's a lot more that we can talk about. And, you know, for the listeners out there, first you should go check out Chris on all the platforms that he's got. He's got big on Instagram. He's got a YouTube channel that's got some awesome content. That was what people were recommending to me, what I clicked on. I was like, yeah, that's why we got to get in touch, as well as other places. What would be the best way for people? And I'll probably, you know, somehow back edit it in, but what would be the best way for people to follow along with what you're doing and saying and putting out there?
So first of all, Christian, when you told me that a couple of guys mentioned CoinTable, I'm very deeply flattered. I appreciate that a lot. I appreciate you getting with me, putting me on your show, all that kind of stuff. And it just means a lot to me that, you know, I've been out here focusing on making coins and buying and selling coins, and the content creation is something that I'm passionate about. but I've kind of had some mental blockers, I guess, about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate the solid feedback, man. It means a lot. And I'm going to make a commitment right now on your show. I'm going to be putting at least one video on YouTube every week, period, from here on out.
That's
okay?
going to make it happen. That'll be huge for, that's what I say. You got to get the schedule to anybody out there who's looking to make it, because, that'll be good for anybody when you're backing it up with the knowledge and the, even the character, the energy and that sort of thing. Like, that's going to be huge for again, making it blown up. So, but just to confirm with you, it's YouTube is where you're now going to be being more active. I know you've got a huge,
every day on Instagram. So at CoinTable, and then also but that's what I'm saying. I've been half in, half out with the YouTube thing. So I appreciate you, because I'm putting it out right now, and I know you have tons of viewers. There's gonna be at least one video a week. That's my commitment to myself. Awesome. And now that you're gonna put that out, I have to do it. So exactly. That's what's gonna get done. So follow me on YouTube and or Instagram. Instagram's a lot of shorter, content. YouTube's gonna be longer form content. And then I've got some plans for there, but let's just keep it to where I can manage it at this point. YouTube, Instagram, and that'll be good. And I appreciate it. I appreciate any and all support. So
thank you so much for coming on, and the viewers will definitely be seeing a lot more of you as we kind of discuss some topics. Some of what, building off of what we chatted about today, others maybe will come up with something new. But again, want to reiterate how much I enjoyed having you. I think it's a great new form just of a type of video to make. I'd never even really considered it. And when you mentioned, just the chat, Zooms is what the platform we're using for the viewers, but I think it's just awesome. So great. So anyways, thanks so much. And we'll see you shortly on the channel.
Yeah, I can't wait to do it again, man. So thank you very much. And just appreciate you and appreciate all of you guys. Appreciate the whole community. The entire community has been super awesome. And I'm going to start focusing on giving back a lot more. So thanks for that little nudge, Christian. I appreciate it. You're a stud.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the longer form conversation. Hope that you enjoyed. I really appreciated having the guest here, and I encourage you to follow or interact with them on their platforms. I'd also encourage you to subscribe to Treasure Town on YouTube, the Christian Harch podcast, and keep listening or interacting with my content. There's going to be a lot more of it out there, and I'll look forward to seeing you on those pieces.